I stood in the palace courtyard with my heart beating fast, because a man I had never met before was shouting that the throne of my father belonged to him. The elders were confused. The villagers were gathering. The man's voice was loud like thunder. He pointed at me and said, I was sitting on a throne that was not mine. Before anyone could speak, he turned, called the boys he came with, and walked out of the palace like a man planning trouble. That moment shook me, and even now I know it was the beginning of something dark. But let me take you back to how everything started. I only returned home because my father, King Madu of Umuokoro, had died. We were not close. For many years we did not speak because of one big argument. I stayed in the city and he ruled the kingdom without me. People said he always asked about me, but pride can block a man's mouth, and he never called me. I too kept waiting for him to call, so our silence stayed strong. When a king dies, the first son must draw water from the ancestral well. It is not a normal well. It is old, deep, and only the prince can touch the bucket. If anyone else tries it, the elders say the spirits will get angry. So when I returned home after many years, my first duty was to go to that well. The palace was full of drums and mourning cloth. Women sat on the ground crying. Men walked around with long faces. As I walked into the compound, people whispered that the prince had returned. Some bowed, some stared. I felt like a stranger in my own home. The chief priest, Ogbuefi Anuebe, walked up to me and told me to prepare for the ritual. He said it in a calm voice, but his eyes looked at me like he was trying to see inside my chest. My mother hugged me tightly. She cried like she had been waiting for this moment for too long. At nightfall, I followed the elders to the ancestral well. The place was quiet. Even the night insects kept silent. They handed me the rope. I dropped the bucket inside the well and listened to the water splash far below. When I pulled the bucket back up, I knew something was inside it because the weight was different. When the bucket came out, I saw an iron box tied to a carved stone. The elders stepped back. The chief priest frowned. My mother covered her mouth. Nobody said anything, but everyone knew what that meant. The box was from my father, and he hid it in the only place he knew I would come. That night, after the well ritual was completed, I went into my father's chamber alone. I placed the iron box on his bed. My hands were shaking. I forced it open, and what I saw inside changed my life forever. That was the night I learned that I was not the only son of King Madu. When I opened the box that night, the lamp beside me shook a little because my hand could not stay still. Inside the box, the first thing I saw was an old picture. My father was young in that picture, and he was holding a small boy. The boy looked nothing like me, yet something in his eyes felt familiar. Under the picture were letters, many of them, tied with palm rope that had become dry. I picked the first one, and as I read it, my chest became heavy. My father had a son before me, a boy he never told anyone about, a boy he tried to care for in secret, a boy who was older than me, living somewhere far away. As I read the letters one by one, I saw his pain. He wrote about how the woman he loved died suddenly and how her family blamed him. They took the child away from him and warned him never to come near them again. My father tried to send money. He tried to write. He tried to visit. But everything he did was blocked. Even as a king, he could not reach his own son. My throat became tight. For so many years, I thought my father was a hard man who did not show love. I did not know he was carrying a secret that burned him from inside. I sat on his bed and held the letters like they were fire. I felt anger, confusion, and something that felt like pity. As I closed the box, the door to the chamber opened. The chief priest stood there with his staff. His eyes were dark like someone who had seen too many secrets in his life. He looked at the box, then at me. He told me that some things the dead hide should remain hidden. He said the well was not a place for ordinary truth, but I was angry, and I did not want to listen. I told him I wanted to know everything. He watched me with a sad face, and for a moment I felt he already knew this truth long before I opened the box. When he left, my mother came in. She sat beside me and held my hand. I could feel her fear. She begged me not to search for the boy. She said bringing him into the matter would tear the kingdom apart. She said my father kept the secret because he did not want a war inside the palace. But I felt something strong inside me, something that did not want to walk away from the truth. That night, I could not sleep. I sat outside my father's chamber with the picture in my hand. I kept thinking of the boy, thinking of the life he lived, thinking of the pain he carried, thinking of how he must have seen the world. I thought of myself too, living angry at my father while not knowing the full story. Before dawn, I made up my mind. I was going to find him no matter where he was or what it would cause. I did not know that the journey I was about to start would shake the throne, break my peace, and bring a storm that would follow me even after I became king. I only knew one thing that morning. I had a brother out there, and I needed to find him. The morning after I made up my mind, I left the palace quietly. I did not tell the elders. I did not wait for the chiefs. I carried only the picture, the last letter, and the name written on the back of it. The name was Anayo. I kept saying the name in my heart as I walked out of the kingdom. The air felt heavy, like the soil itself knew I was going to open a door that had been closed for many years. I traveled to the town written in the last letter. It was far, and the journey felt longer because my mind was full. Every noise on the road sounded like a warning. Every person I passed looked at me like they knew what I was carrying inside me. When I got to the place, I walked around asking questions. Some people looked at me with confusion. Some ignored me. Some shook their heads like they had heard the story before, but did not want to be involved. After a long search, an old woman selling roasted yam pointed me to a small building that looked tired. The paint was falling off. The gate was rusty. She told me it used to be an orphanage. When I walked inside, my chest tightened. Children used to run in that compound. Now only silence lived there. I met a caretaker who still came once in a while to check the place. He was an old man with a slow voice. When I showed him the picture, he looked at it for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. He said he remembered a boy that looked like that. A boy who did not smile easily. A boy who always sat alone. A boy who left the orphanage many years ago when he became too old to stay. He told me the boy left with some street boys who moved around like a gang. They were rough boys, the kind of boys who trusted no one. The caretaker said Anayo was strong and stubborn and that he always wanted to know who his father was. As the old man talked, I felt something break inside me. I imagined a child trying to understand why life was so hard. I imagined him watching other children get adopted while he stayed behind. I imagined him fighting to survive on the streets while I lived in a palace without knowing he even existed. The caretaker told me where I might find him. A place in the next town. A place where strong boys gathered. A place where men carried scars on their faces and anger in their hearts. I went there with shaky legs. My mind was shouting at me to turn back, but something kept pulling me forward. When I reached the place, I saw rough young men hanging around. Some were smoking. Some were laughing in a loud and careless way. When I asked for Anayo, they all became quiet. One of them pointed inside. I walked in, and there he was. He stood with his back to me at first. He was tall, broad, and strong. When he turned, I froze. His face carried the same sharp features my father had. His eyes looked like a storm that had waited too long to break. When I told him who I was, he did not smile, he did not cry, he did not ask questions. He only stared at me with eyes that held anger, confusion, and something deeper that I could not explain. In that moment, I knew this journey was not going to end with joy. I knew I had stirred something that had been sleeping in darkness. I knew I'd opened a door that might never be closed again. And I was not wrong, because that was the day my brother decided to follow me back to Umuokoro Kingdom. And that was the day trouble started walking beside me. When Anayo agreed to follow me back to Umuokoro, something in my stomach turned. It was not fear alone, it was worry. The way he moved with the boys around him made me understand one thing clearly. He was not just a man who suffered. He was a man who had learned to survive through force. On the journey back, he walked like someone who owned the road. The boys who followed him behaved like guards, even though nobody sent them. As we entered the kingdom, people stopped to look. Some stepped away from the road. Some whispered. Some children ran to call their parents. My own heart was beating because I knew the elders would not like this. I also knew the chief priest would know something was coming even before he saw us. When we reached the palace gate, the guards dropped their staffs and stared at Anayo. He looked at the palace like someone walking into a place he believed was meant for him. I asked him to wait while I spoke to the elders first, but he pushed past me like my words were wind. The boys behind him followed with strong steps. I could hear the drums of mourning still sounding inside the compound, but the palace no longer felt like a place for quiet rituals. It felt like a storm was entering. The elders were in the courtyard discussing the next steps for the burial. When Anayo walked in, all of them stood up in shock. My mother came out from one of the rooms and covered her chest with her hands. The chief priest appeared like he rose from the ground itself. His eyes were sharp and steady. Anayo walked to the center of the courtyard and looked at everyone one by one. Then he looked at the king's stool. The stool I was supposed to sit on, the stool that carried the weight of the kingdom. He said that the throne belonged to him because he was the first son. His voice was strong and loud. The courtyard trembled with his words. The elders gasped. Even the guards looked confused. I stepped forward to talk, but the chief priest raised his staff and hit the ground. The sound carried through the whole palace. He reminded everyone of the ancient law that a child from a concubine cannot inherit the throne. He said the only recognized heir was the child from a lawful marriage, which was me. He said the kingdom was built on rules older than all of us, and that no storm from outside could change it. The words entered Anayo like a spear. I saw the pain flash across his face, his jaw tightened, his eyes became red. He looked at me like I was the one stealing something from him. Then he looked at the elders, and I saw something dangerous grow inside him. He said the kingdom had rejected him. He said all of us would regret it. He said he would return one day, and when he returned, the ground would shake. His voice carried anger that felt like fire rising in the courtyard. The boys behind him shouted in agreement. Some kicked the palace pillars. Some made loud noises to show their support. My mother started crying. The elders stepped back. The guards grabbed their weapons, but the chief priest told them to allow him to leave. He said if they fought him that day, the kingdom would fall into blood. So they watched as Anayo turned around with his boys and walked out of the palace like a man going to prepare for war. I felt a cold wind pass through my bones. I wanted to go after him and talk, but something held my legs. Maybe fear, maybe guilt, maybe both. That night, the palace was silent, but my mind was loud. I could not sleep. I sat in the courtyard thinking of the look in Anayo's eyes, thinking of the anger he carried, thinking of the life he lived that turned him into a man ready to fight the world. I wanted peace. I wanted to unite us, but instead I had brought fire into the palace, and I knew that fire would not rest, not until it burned something. The days after Anayo left the palace felt like the sky was holding its breath. The drums for my father's burial continued, but the sound no longer carried only sorrow. It carried fear. People now looked over their shoulders. Mothers told their children to return home early. Even the wind felt different. Every time it blew, the leaves on the trees shook like they were warning us of something coming. The elders called meetings every day. Some blamed me for bringing Anayo into the kingdom. Some said the boy had the spirit of a wounded lion and that I should have left him where he was. My mother kept begging the chief priest to pray for protection. The guards doubled their watch. The palace no longer felt like home. It felt like a place waiting for an attack. When the final burial rites ended, the crown was brought before me. It was simple but heavy. The gold was old. The designs were carved by hand many years before I was born. As the chief priest lifted it, I felt sweat on my palms. The drums stopped. The crowd became quiet. My father's body had been laid to rest. The land was ready for the next king. When the chief priest placed the crown on my head, the whole kingdom shouted. Some clapped, some cried, some knelt. I felt the weight of the crown press down on me, not just on my head, but on my heart. I became King Obinna of Umuokoro that day. But instead of joy, I felt a shadow on my back. After the coronation, I went to sit on the king's stool. The elders stood around me, greeting me with long speeches. But I was not listening. My mind was on Anayo. I remembered the way he looked at the stool the first time he saw it. I remembered the anger in his voice when he said he would return. I remembered the boys who followed him, boys who were ready to do anything for him. I felt the air grow cold in the throne room, even though the sun was high outside. That night, when everyone left, I remained alone in the palace hall. The moonlight fell across the floor. I looked at the walls that carried the stories of the kings before me. My father's staff leaned against the corner. I touched it and felt a shock in my chest. I wished he had told me the truth when he was alive. I wished he had found a way to bring Anayo close. I wished he had not left this battle for me to face alone. I walked to the balcony and looked out at the kingdom. The houses were quiet. The fires in the compounds were burning low. The road that led out of the kingdom was dark. Somewhere beyond that darkness, I knew Anayo was planning. The anger in his eyes was not the kind that died quickly. It was the kind that grew, the kind that spread, the kind that waited. As I stood there, the chief priest joined me. He did not speak at first. He only looked at the sky. Then he told me that some storms do not start with thunder. Some storms start quietly, like a whisper. He told me to be strong. He told me to watch the borders. He told me to prepare. When he left, I stood alone again. The weight of the crown felt heavier than before. I looked at the darkness beyond the palace and felt my heart tighten. I knew he would come back. I knew he would not come alone. I knew the peace of the kingdom would not last, and as the cold night wind blew across my face, I said the words in my heart, I have to be ready when he returns.